Hi guys, welcome back to RUE MORGUE TV. I'm Andrea Subasati, your executive editor, and I wanted to remind you that issue 186 of RUE MORGUE magazine is on stands now. It's our Jan-Feb 2019 issue. It's our Women in Horror special edition. We've got great features on women working in horror, both in front of the camera and behind it. And as well, we've got our 2018 Year in Review feature, which has our best feature as voted by you guys, which kind of surprised me, and our 2019 Film Festival and Convention Guide, so you can plan out events across the world. We hope you enjoy it. Check it out, and if you like what you're seeing, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
I'm Joe O'Brien, and you're watching Anatomy of a Scream on RUE MORGUE TV. What I love about Exorcist 3 is that it has absolutely no interest in being Exorcist 3. It's much more interested in being a philosophical murder mystery. It's a supernatural police procedural. It's got its own tone. It's kind of a special movie in a lot of ways. So The Exorcist was obviously a huge hit, and huge hits in the 70s and into the 80s. Sequel. In 1978, a sequel was made, Exorcist II: The Heretic, by John Boorman. It's a very eccentric movie. It's not a very good movie. It's a sort of fascinating train wreck. If you like train wrecks, this is definitely the movie for you.
Father, please bring her back.
And then so 15 odd years later, 15 years after 1973, I should say, 15 years after the original Exorcist, it came times like, what if we made another Exorcist movie? But that wasn't really the idea. They made a very smart decision. Well, let's go to William Peter Blatty, who is now not just a screenwriter, but a director. He had directed a fabulous movie called The Ninth Configuration a few years earlier. And a lot of The Ninth Configuration informs Exorcist 3. It's much more tonally, it's much more a sequel to The Ninth Configuration than it ever was to The Exorcist. And so Blatty set out not to make an Exorcist sequel. He set out to make an adaptation of his novel Legion. The film was produced as Legion. Commercial interests sort of pressured Blatty into calling it Exorcist 3, making it more of an Exorcist movie. That's a subject for another time. It's a huge subject, the reshooting and recutting of Exorcist 3. But there's a scene that's in every version, and it comes about 2/3 of the way through the movie, and that's the scare I want to talk to you about today on Anatomy of a Scream, the hallway scene from Exorcist 3. In the last segment, we talked about how John Carpenter used camera motion to generate suspense. In Exorcist 3, William Peter Blatty uses the opposite. He uses stillness to create an unrelenting, constantly building sense of tension with an incredible payoff. It's a jump scare. In its simplest terms, it's a jump scare. But what it also is the greatest jump scare of all time, in large part because of everything that happens up to it. And not just the scene itself, but the whole movie kind of builds to this singular moment. At the halfway point, we've been following murders that we don't ever see, and this is kind of the key to The Exorcist 3. We hear about these gruesome murders, but we don't see them. And we get little pieces of how these murders are being carried out, and it gets weirder and weirder and weirder as the film goes on. We learn that the victims are being decapitated. We learn that the victims all have the letter K in their name. We learn they're religiously motivated and somehow connected to the original exorcism of Regan McNeil. But we don't quite know how all of these pieces fit together. And halfway through the movie, Blatty introduces us to a new character. Patient X, he's called.
Are they calling these Gemini killings in the papers? You must get them to do that, Lieutenant. It's important.
The Gemini is dead.
No, I am not! I'm alive! I go on! I breathe! Look at me! Look at me! And tell me what you see!
We learn that the body of Father Karras has been possessed and reanimated by the Gemini killer, a serial killer electrocuted 15 years earlier, the same night that Father Karras fell to his death at the end of the original Exorcist. Karras was the best friend of Lieutenant Kinderman, played by George C. Scott. George C. Scott is now only learning this information now. They have a fascinatingly low-key conversation that ends in a strange way. Kinderman hears the Gemini killer / Father Karras drift off into catatonia, whispering something about a character named Amy and her beads. But we've never met a character called Amy up to this point. We don't know beads. What are we talking about? It just feels like a grace note. It's just a strange way out of a scene. Blatty's a very eccentric writer, and he's very given to little flights of fancy like this. A few scenes later, the film just cuts to a hallway, and it just holds this shot. And it continues to hold it. And there's little bits of action at the other end of the hallway, but slowly we come to realize they're not cutting away. The camera isn't moving. What are we doing here? There are no characters from the film that we necessarily recognize. And it keeps going. And as an audience, we've been primed to be tense because Blatty has withheld any sort of tension release that you would get from a murder scene or some kind of grisly goings-on or any kind of spectacle. He's been deliberately withholding this from us. And he's continuing to withhold, but in a new way. And so we're primed to be tense because of the stillness, because of the sudden lack of motion. And we lean forward a little bit. Maybe not too far, because we're a little concerned what might go on. But this hasn't been a film about jump scares and horror movie things. It's been a slow, emotional buildup. Then there's a cut. There's a tiny little scene on the side. And then it's back to the hallway, and we hold on the hallway even more. Now, what's important about this little cutaway, and I'll talk about this more when we analyze it, we are essentially in this sequence following the adventures of a nurse in a red sweater. We've seen her a couple of times. Blatty's actually taken very good care to introduce her, in one case in a non sequitur conversation between Father Dyer and Lieutenant Kinderman. She pops in and out of a scene for no reason, other than that she gets put into our head. And she's immediately identifiable by this red sweater. We don't know her name yet, and that's going to become super critical. As she journeys up the hallway to investigate a mysterious sound, classic horror movie gag, she finds her way into a room where she is startled first by a glass of ice water, and then, more abruptly, by a patient who wakes up and gives her some shit for waking him up. In that moment, she gives us her name, Amy Keating. And somewhere in the back of our mind, we hear two things. The name Amy is spoken by the Gemini killer, and the letter K. And so when she steps back out into that master shot, that endless, unmoving, static hallway, we are now, despite having just had a little jump scare, 10 times more tense. Because now the film has identified her as a potential victim. It's raining, it's dark. There's no one in the hospital except the patients, the staff, and the police officers assigned to watch the entrances and exits for any sign of the murderer they know is on the loose. Let's take a look at the scene in detail. All right, so this is the shot we're going to spend most of our time on with notable exceptions. Watch very carefully this little dance of actors that goes on. We're going to spend most of our time looking down at this perfect, almost a proscenium stage that he's created with these arches in the, on the set. Note the way that the nurse pops out of the shot, because we're mostly in white. She's wearing white, but she has this red sweater. As I said earlier, this is how we're identifying her. Also, if you look to screen left, there's a little blue sliver pointing directly at her that's also possibly calling attention to her eye. Now, we may just now be starting to realize that the camera hasn't moved. Nothing seems to be happening. So it begs the question, why are we here? This is not a movie that's given to just wandering away for no reason. So we're definitely up for something, but we don't know what it's going to be. Is it going to be a bog standard horror scare? This doesn't feel like that kind of movie. But then again, it doesn't feel like any other kind of movie either. It feels like this movie. We're going to get a big shift here. There's a small scare coming up. Just a little boop. And maybe that depletes some of the tension that we've been building up. Not much, but a bit. Blatty's going to break our tension again with a big cut here. It's changing from a long shot to a huge close-up of her hand. But now it's going to creepily open us into this other space, this other patient area. And we're going to follow this almost without a cut. And again, the pacing stays the same. He hasn't pulled us out of the movie. He's just spiking us a little bit every time, just tiny little breaks in the tension to keep us from, just to kind of keep our guard down. Now, why are we watching this, nurse? Still haven't figured that out. What's going on? Oh, it's kind of, now we're feeling maybe it is just a stupid horror movie cliche. She's been scared by a glass of water and a big jump scare. Now, this is kind of a cheap scare, but it serves a really, really important purpose. First of all, it gives us a little break in the tension. Not so much as to completely dissipate it. And there, critically, she gives us her name, Amy Keating. Now, knowing this, we've come out of that room with even more knowledge than we had going in. Really important knowledge. We're now focused specifically on this character, this nurse, Amy Keating, the nurse in the red sweater. Now, if we weren't tense before, all we are is tense now. Those little breaks just serve to rattle us a little so that when the tension came back, it came back with incredible force. The shot's now going to go on for almost a third longer than it originally did. We're just going to watch this now. And the way that John Carpenter used his camera to create tension through movement, we're seeing the opposite of that here. It's tension through stillness, but your eye is still being directed very carefully. You see this little dance of policemen moving in and out of frame, the nurse moving around. We're going to cut in closer to her. And now we're really focused on her. What are we doing? And now we're focused on this. More tension. Are we going to break? Is it going to be the same way? Nope. We're back to this long shot again. What the hell is going on here? What is this long shot? He holds on it for an absurdly long amount of time. Blatty actually got some pushback from his director of photography on this. This is Father Dyer's room. If we haven't noticed, we haven't actually looked at this angle for very long in the rest of the movie. And our eye is being directed around. There goes the policeman leaving the room. Everything seems fine, except now she's on her own. She's going to walk in this room. Now the scare's going to happen? Is it going to be now? No. There's a policeman. We feel safe again. He's coming to grab something. I love this choreography. This is beautiful. It's all done with intent. She walks out of the room. Everything's fine in that room. There's nobody there. Watch carefully, because now, Jesus Christ! That never fails to get you, because no matter how many times I watch it, the timing's never the same. What is this? Exorcist 3 is, in any version, an absolute masterclass in the power of withholding and stillness to create tension. While most horror directors will throw anything they can at the camera just to get a scare out of you, Blatty understands that it's all about the quiet moments before the big scare. I hope you've enjoyed this segment of Anatomy of a Scream. Please like or subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Leave us a comment and let us know what your favorite scare is from your favorite movie, and maybe we'll cover it in a future episode. My name's Joe O'Brien, and this is RUE MORGUE TV. Jesus Christ, what the fuck is that?